Шановні колеги, ми продовжуємо робочий день. І я нагадую, що о 1:30 у нас додатковий брифінг буде на тему Україна-НАТО, правдива історія військового співробітництва. А зараз ми маємо...
Now we are going to have the briefing, the border with Crimea, how to ensure the freedom of movement. We have Oleg Slobodyan, Press Secretary and Assistant Commander, and Vasyl Barabash, the Senior Officer of the Registration and Passport Department, State Border Guard Service of Ukraine, and Martynovskyi, lawyer of Regional Center for Human Rights, and Daria, Svyrydova, lawyer of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union. You have the floor, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, dear esteemed colleagues. First of all, I would like to say, since we do not have too much time, that today's event we have within the framework of the cooperation which started between the State Border Service of Ukraine and the representatives of Helsinki Union, yet in the end of last year. Why there was such a necessity for such an intense cooperation? That was a kind of a step taken to meet each other, because on the one hand, the representatives of the Helsinki Union would take care of the human rights, they visualize the problems existent in the State Border Service of Ukraine, the administrative border with the temporarily occupied Crimea. On the other hand, the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine also knows about those problems and they tries to resolve those. And we, of course, we do not reject any assistance because we understand that only by joining the efforts we can resolve the problems. Together with the reps of the Helsinki Union, we had some of the meetings. We worked on the roadmap where we determined or identified the most threatening directions and more topical issues for the border with the temporarily occupied Crimea. We, let's say, developed some kind of the information regarding the authorities and powers regarding those citizens who cross the administrative border. Also, we prepared the memory notes for those citizens who cross those borders, for them to know what rights they do have and what they can do and how they can protect themselves. Now we continue to carry out the same scope of work, and we identified a number of the issues we are going to take care of in the future. Maybe my colleagues will touch upon those issues in more detail, but I would like to draw attention to the following issues. The fact that together with the reps of the Helsinki Union, we developed the procedure for coming and leaving the temporarily occupied territory. This draft document was approved, coordinated in the Ministry of Justice and was submitted for consideration by the government. The finalized version after everybody's approval were submitted for consideration of the government committee. We did their work on the 6th of March. Approved that, but also made some remarks or comments which require some kind of further elaboration or introduce some modifications to that documents, and do hope that we are not going to delay with the finalization of that document, because this is very important, which will allow us to resolve a lot of outstanding issues. What regards our cooperation, the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine knows about the existing problems, including those which include the abuse on the part of our personnel. I would like to draw attention to the fact that when we start to actively cooperate with the reps of the Helsinki Union, the number of the applications and or the complaints regarding our personnel were decreased several times, especially those which pertain to the temporarily occupied Crimea. This was a result of our radical actions on the rotation of our personnel, the replacement of our personnel, for example.
And for example, only this year, the State Border Guard Service did 134 checks of the checkpoints. As a result, 38 investigations were filed, and 139 persons were punished, and 4 officers were moved to other places of service. We introduced several records to the register of pre-court investigation. We understand that we still have a lot of problems to solve, but working together with the representatives of Helsinki Union, we believe that we'll succeed to do that most efficient and fast way. Thank you, colleagues, for your attention to Crimean issue. I would like to say that this, in our minds, it's a positive experience of cooperation between governmental agencies and public organizations, NGOs. Unfortunately, we can observe lack of interest in power circles to Crimean problems, to the citizens of Crimea and occupied territories. In fact, as it was claimed by the representative of Border Guard Services of Ukraine, it is for half a year already. There's a cooperation exists between the Helsinki Union, Civic Freedoms Almenda Society, and several groups that left Crimea, but they work in their interests. As for our experience in cooperation, I would like to add that, of course, in the cooperation, not only one issue was settled, not only because of human rights violations, but related to many problems people are facing, people who live the occupied territories are facing. And we hope that many other issues will be solved, like the one that concerns the procedures of living and entering the occupied territory of Crimea. This procedure had to be adopted, but yet it is not finalized. And it would be as well an issue of official refusal to enter to somebody. We observed certain cases when people were when the State Border Guard Services refused to allow anybody to enter or to leave the territory of Crimea. And hopefully this procedure, which is now under consideration in the Cabinet of Ministers, will finally be adopted, and that will put the end to the probable violation of human rights at the checkpoints to occupied territories. Another issue I would like to raise here is the logistic issue. As you know, at the end of December, the Council for National Security and Defense decided to stop passenger traffic by railroad to and from Crimea. In our mind, it is a lot of negative consequences because citizens of Ukraine, they do not have any means to travel to Crimea. And many people, they have their relatives in Crimea, and many people in Crimea, living in Crimea, have their relatives in continental part of Ukraine. So it is not logical in our mind, this decision, because it is not place friendly to the improvement of the strategy of our relations between Ukraine and occupied territory. Again, we usually have certain application from citizens that are being demanded to pay certain money demanded by state border guard personnel. They've been refused to take their belongings with them to Crimea, and again sometimes they have double declaring of their luggage. All of that issues hopefully will be solved. The issues that lays in the competence or responsibility of the State Border Guard Service. Yes, of course, we registered certain decrease in the number of applications of citizens based on some actions of the State Border Guard Services. That's why we invite everybody to cooperate with NGOs, with public organizations. There are certain other institutions that must be open towards Crimean problems, and they should be involved in the advisory activity. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Roman Martynovskyi, Regional Center for Human Rights. The range of issues that, in our view, need to be immediately resolved includes the one of the crossing of administrative border and related IDs, ID documents. It is our opinion that there is a problem here because there are citizens that have no proper IDs because of the lack of Ukrainian passport, either internal, domestic, or international one. And I think in this regard we may use available international practices. For example, the decision of the International Court of Justice that regards the stay of representatives of Central African Republic on the territory of Namibia, and that concerns citizens without proper IDs. So the court decision stated clearly that people may produce documents issued to them by occupational forces, and these documents may be acceptable in specific cases. In absence of other statutory documents, they should be accepted by government authorities of Namibia. Maybe this experience could be used, and we do understand that it will be quite complicated matter to resolve these matters before any specific piece of legislation is adopted, particularly given that the State Border Service has limited authority and may not do it on itself, and it clearly begs relevant decisions to be made by the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine and relevant clarifications, public clarifications by the State Border Service. But anyway, this is a very urgent issue. Passports of Russian Federation issued by occupational powers in Sevastopol, in other parts of the Crimea, both certificates issued there by Russian occupational authorities, also create certain collisions because people get documents of this occupational government in the city of Sevastopol in the Crimea. I'd like also to recall the practices of the UN Court that was adopted on 21st of June 1971, which may be suitable here. Another matter that may not be left out in the cold by the State Border Service is the information propaganda campaign. on matters of border crossings. It is not secret that we have huge queues of trucks and citizens waiting on both sides of the borderline, waiting for their chance to pass the border. And most of the time we also hear Russia's accusations that that Ukrainian border guards are to blame because they are hindering this process, blocking transport from coming, say, to the Crimea from the territory of Ukraine. But in this case, they hid the information that there is a huge aggregation of transport in the neutral area of this administrative border, which is due to really huge procrastinations, intentional procrastinations on behalf of Russian border guards. And with multi-kilometer queues, you can only imagine these lines of long-haul trucks and passenger cars as well, because the standing practice is 1, 2, 3 long-haul trucks and 1, 2, 3 passenger cars. So normally this is the standard rate for them for an hour. Obviously, we lack the proper Ukrainian media which would cover correct situation. Then maybe it is the task for the state guard service, a border guard service, to come up with explanations, reasonable explanations of why this happens at the border. And there is also another matter that I'd like to mention here. It has been mentioned multiple times, but anyway, it is the question of secondary legal counseling to people detained during attempt to cross the administrative crossing. It shall be necessary to provide such secondary legal counsel to those people from state money. Thank you, dear experts. Are there any questions to the group? If yes, just don't forget to name yourself. Alexei Arunyan, Radio Freedom, Crimea Realities. My question is to Roman Slobodyan, to Oleg Slobodyan, with regards to existing rules that allow for the crossing of this administrative border. With your permission, I'd like to ask my colleague from the State Border Guard Service, Vasyl Barabash, who represents Department of Registration and Passport Control Department. He is better to give you the answer. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Vasyl Barabash, Senior Officer of Border Control Department, State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. As regards the crossing of administrative border with the Crimea by car, by minivans, by buses, as you know, on 22nd of December 2014, there was an interdepartmental meeting at the administration of the President of Ukraine. And one of the decisions of that meeting declared that the movement of passenger buses and minivans should be stopped at this border. At this moment, the border is crossed by individuals, either in cars or by foot. As regards the checkpoint, before the decision was made, we had 155 buses entering country and 142 of them leaving the country. That was the monthly number. So if we take Chaplinka Point, it was 80 and 86 respectively, and on at Chongar, 34 to enter the country and 35 to leave the country. So surely that decision made certain problems for the State Border Service in terms of being really not convenient for the service itself, for other controlling authorities. At this moment, our service, when processing citizens, nationals going towards the Crimea, we have to act within the scope of the legislative framework that we have now.
Question on, you've mentioned that on 23rd December you had a meeting and where the decision was made to impose this blockade, and different officials have they give us different versions of this decision. So it was decided that if trains will travel, then it will be renegades from Russian Federation will infiltrate into our territory. When if the trains will be back in service, then your border guard colleagues, will they be able to stop Russian agents to penetrate Ukrainian territory? We have enough qualified and enough number of qualified experts, enough equipment for explosive search, ammunition search devices, and other terroristic devices to stop this problem from rising. As for the restrictions in rail traffic, we had rather high numbers, high figures of revealing of such explosive, etc. So, to my understanding, you have enough forces to stop this. Yes, of course. Bezenko Stanislav, First Independence News. Do you have any information on seizure of Russian personal belongings by Russian border guard services, and do you give people back their belongings? I will answer this question. As for any results of Russian border guard servicemen work, we do not communicate to them. That's why any data on any results or any seizures, we don't have any information on that from them. Only representatives of legal companies involved in human rights watch, they can have this information. Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. You mentioned that the procedure for entering and leaving Crimea is under consideration in the Cabinet of Ministers, and they developed a special document as instructions. Do you have any brief comments on that? As for the procedure, this document on 6th March was considered at government committee. It was approved as a whole, but several moments must be corrected in that document, so hopefully it will be completed in the nearest futures. And I give floor to Vasyl Petrovich to make further comments. First of all, as for the citizens of Ukraine, the citizens of Ukraine cross administrative border with the Crimea with the use of Ukrainian passport for traveling abroad, or having internal passport. Children may travel having the special traveling document or children traveling document, or they may be entered into their parents' passports. Small children, little children, they could travel with their birth certificates, and having, if a child travels with one of the parents, it must be concern, it must be permit from another parent to travel with that child, and it must be notary notarized, this document. The foreign citizens have to have passport in order to cross Crimean border, and any requirements according to the law as for the presence of special permit, unfortunately, as my colleague already mentioned, this procedure, this document, this regulation is under consideration of the Cabinet of Ministers, and today we do not demand from citizens to have this document. We only check if foreigners do everything legally in their moves over the territory of Ukraine, and we check if this foreigner has left Crimean territory through the border crossing points that have been closed according to the decision of Ukrainian authority. We have 27 of them. Sergei, Ukrainian Journalist Association. So we see today that public organizations are involved in solving of pending issues. In your mind, maybe it must be a public council. Oleg, I give floor to you. In fact, we already have both public council and organization of veterans, some other organizations that are involved in exercising the functions you mentioned, as for setup of communication platforms with Helsinki group and representative of other organizations that are active in solving of our pending problems. Of course, this is our novel, and we will solve that problems. We created another platform with the representatives of Crimean Tatar people. We developed a roadmap jointly with them, and this is another direction of our dialogue. Thank you. Black Sea TV and radio company. My question is to human rights activists. Do you have any violations of that, and probably some bribes you've been noticed? Yes, we have certain questions to the customs service. It is not clear and it is not documented, the zone of customs control. Nobody understands what to declare. There are nothing like understanding where this customs control point is situated, so there are certain abuse of this misinformation or lack of information. Before we had a lot of complaints on attempts to have seizure of Russian passports issued in Crimean territory. Today this has been settled. Today we have several cases on refusals
і не оформлення письмових відмов, але ми ж кажемо, що розроблене рішення,
entering
яке, на жаль, більше не
crossing the
застосовується, відповідно
border
проблеми періодично виникають.
and refusals to support decision with written document. As for bribes, I couldn't tell you anything about that because I'm not a hauler, so I believe that after our
Дуже дякую. І останнє запитання.
approach to state border guard
Speak in
services.
English if the translators translate.
Там є навушник, можна взяти і слухати переклад.
A number of years ago, I had brought a container, privately owned container, into the port of Ilichisk. The container that had brought in was very, very tightly packed. It would have taken the border guards maybe 1 week to take everything out of the container and then 1 week to put everything back in. It's a very time-consuming job to check containers if they're loaded on trucks or if they're loaded on trains. The head of the border control down in Ilichisk at the time, realizing it was going to take 2 weeks to check one container, he brought over, it's a special truck that it's a Mercedes-Benz van, and it has X-ray equipment in it. And what they did is they put the container out into the middle of the yard, and then they went around it with this Mercedes-Benz vehicle with the X-ray equipment. Can they not get, the Border Guard Service not purchase some more of that scanning equipment to bring to the Crimea area? So this way, when a truck comes up, instead of taking things out to go in and inspect, to go around the truck with the X-ray scanner. The X-ray scanner systems, they also make them for railroad cars, so that they are built like a little mini bridge over the train tracks, and then the train cars go through it, and they're scanned with X-rays. This saves tremendous amount of time, and I was just wondering if anybody from the Border Guard Service had thought to purchase some of this equipment to use at the checkpoints where you have these long lines of trucks, or to use at the train stations. It was a suggestion.
Я буквально підсумую питання. Чи може Державна прикордонна служба закупити обладнання, яке б сканувало всі великі контейнери, які
Border Guard
перевозять через
Service
кордон,
could
аби не
purchase the X-ray equipment to check all the big vehicles to save time. Of course, the Border Guard Service cooperate in this with many international organizations and governmental organizations. This equipment would be very useful to have in Crimean distance. And we do certain steps in equipping of border crossing points with this type of equipment as well. I would like to say that recently we had inspection of all the border crossing points in Crimean line of border in order to develop them further, in order to have those border crossing check equipped with all the necessary infrastructure, service areas, for them to have control areas, including scanners, to find out illegal immigrants, explosives, other illegal means that are restricted to cross the border. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we'll have to end up this briefing. Next briefing will start in 1 minute, and additional